There's a very interesting exchange today on the BBC's Politics Live with James Daly, who's the local, I think he's the Bury North MP, Conservative MP, who's the person who urged the Greater Manchester Police to reopen their investigation.
He wrote to them, didn't he?
He wrote to them, providing new evidence. And he was asked today, what exactly offence did he think that Angela Rayner is supposed to have committed? And he said, well, various matters in relation to this. And he was asked again, yeah, but what are you talking about? And he said, well, Greater Manchester Police assessed this and there's further investigation. He was unable to say what offence he thinks she may have committed, or indeed what further evidence he's presented or drawn to the attention of Greater Manchester Police that she may. So the whole thing is murky. If it wasn't for the fact this was a political case, of course, this would be long forgotten. I agree with Kate. She hasn't handled it especially well. Keir Starmer is plainly getting very irritated that it's been dragging on for as long as it has.
For a particular reason, because George Parker's here, who was running really interesting stuff over the weekend on this subject. While the furore, whether it's confected or not, has been going on. Obviously, it's in the interests of Labour's enemies to do that. They want a loud noise about this, to keep Labour on the back foot, talking about that, defending themselves against that, rather than doing anything else. But the police are, we know, investigating Angela Rayner at her council house, and the sale of that council house, well, was capital gains tax that was due. Was that paid if it was due? And did she register it properly with the electoral roll? And George Parker, over to you, because you had some interesting stuff. Tell us about that.
Well, this is a story which divides opinion like virtually no other. When you follow this on social media, some people think this shouldn't be being covered at all. Some people think this is the greatest crime since the creation of sliced bread, to go back to our previous conversation. And one of the things that was very curious about this story at the end of last week, when the Greater Manchester Police said they were investigating this, was it was not entirely clear what exactly they were investigating. They haven't said. But it seems that the most likely thing they're looking at is the idea that Angela Rayner may have given false information about where she was living under the Representation of the People Act 1983. And a lecturer in Edinburgh, University
a professor of law,
Scott Wortley, pointed out that any prosecution under that act would have to begin within 12 months of an alleged offence.
Or 2 years in exceptional circumstances.
Or 2 years under exceptional circumstances. Now, given that the offence we think took, if there was an offence, would have taken place in the early 2010s, clearly the offence will have been timed out. There's no chance under the law of a successful prosecution being mounted. So you've got to ask yourself then, in that situation, why is Greater Manchester Police investigating a potential offence into when they know there's no realistic prospect or no prospect at all under the law of a conviction? And I think that's important, because you notice that Angela Rayner said that she will step aside as deputy leader if she's convicted of a criminal offence. Well, as far as we can tell, there's no prospect at all of that happening.
Well, have a quick listen to this while we're looking at possible causes where it may lead, or if it leads anywhere. Ian Kelsey, as the former chair of the Law Society's Criminal Law Committee, he's a partner in Kelsey and Hall Solicitors, and I asked his opinion on this earlier on.
Well, frankly, it seems to me a storm in a political egg cup. I can't really see the justification in having one. It's a matter, it seems to me, if it's tax for HMRC to be looking at as to whether tax has been properly paid or not. The issue in relation to the registration of an address, as I understand it, will be a summary-only offence, and it would be a complete waste of time, Manchester Police investigating it, because it wouldn't go past go, because they're time limited, those offences, to 6 months.
Well, so that's another lawyer, Ian Kelsey. And you, Kate, have been looking at this too for your podcast.
It's for the Story podcast, for the Times. We were talking about this in relation to what George was saying about how this is timed out. And actually, one of the difficulties is we really don't know what the police are investigating. But even if they are investigating the potential for not paying capital gains tax, let's just take the other side of this story, that also times out after 6 years. So HMRC cannot pursue you. If you accidentally don't pay the right tax after 6 years, they can't pursue you for it anyway. So it's very, very difficult to see, however you cut this, in a situation where Angela Rayner could be found, guilty and prosecuted for either of these things. I think that is the bottom line here. What I do think remains is the fact that there are still some questions about why Angela Rayner hasn't just been really super clear about what actually went on here, because she hasn't. That's the reason why we're still asking the questions. We don't know which property she lived in full time. She has said that her home on Victoria Road, I think it's Victoria Road, was her primary residence. But she's also indicated that she did live with her husband, who lived a mile or so down the road, in his property, because there was a complex family situation and things were not always easy. I think she could have been much clearer about the tax advice that she got relating to capital gains. She could have been much clearer about where she was living at the time. And she could have avoided a lot of this back and forth, which is still going on, because ultimately people feel that they haven't got a proper answer from her.
Yeah.
Just going back to what offence she might or might not have committed, there was a very interesting exchange today on the BBC's Politics Live with James Daly, who's the local, I think he's the Bury North MP, Conservative MP, who's the person who urged the Greater Manchester Police to reopen their investigation.
He wrote to them, didn't he?
He wrote to them, providing new evidence. And he was asked today, what exactly offence did he think that Angela Rayner is supposed to have committed? And he said, well, various matters in relation to this. And he was asked again, yeah, but what are you talking about? And he said, well, Greater Manchester Police assessed this and there's further investigation. He was unable to say what offence he thinks she may have committed, or indeed what further evidence he's presented or drawn to the attention of Greater Manchester Police that she may. So the whole thing is murky. If it wasn't for the fact this was a political case, of course, this would be long forgotten. I agree with Kate. She hasn't handled it especially well. Keir Starmer is plainly getting very irritated that it's been dragging on for as long as it has. And to be honest, it's good preparation for Labour, because there are a whole load of people on the Labour front bench who will have to get used to this kind of scrutiny, because they want to make the transition from opposition to having ministerial jobs, and they will be under the spotlight in a way which they can barely imagine at this stage.
I think that's true. And also, those who are taking shots at Angela Rayner over this, they're already sort of pivoting, adjusting their sights. You hear one or two of the critics saying, look, it's not really about whether there was an offence, it's about whether she was straight. So whatever the police may say or not say, this is going to carry on, because this is politics. Or at least carry on for as long as it's got the legs to carry on, which I guess is at least a little while yet. And then it's going to be up to everyone out there listening, watching, to see whether they can, what they make of it all.
Yeah, and I think George is right here that this is what's actually happening in sort of slow motion in front of us is the transition. It's the way that Labour is now being questioned in a much more serious manner by journalists. Okay, well, yeah, you said that you don't want to talk about it because it's your private family life. You don't want to drag your family into it. You've given us I'll show you mine if you show me yours in terms of your tax advice. But actually, that's not enough. If you are going to form the next government, you need to have a better answer than that. It may have satisfied at some point previously, but it doesn't now. And I think, George is entirely right. This is everything that goes along with the expectation that you are about to enter Downing Street.
All right, we will move on for now. Come back to this at some point, not quite sure when, maybe tomorrow, maybe in half an hour's time. This is Pienaar and Friends, George Parker and Kate McCann here with me tomorrow morning at 9. Be ready for this. Tune in. William Hague, Marianne Seacart are together on Breakfast on Times Radio, giving us their take on the big stories of the day. That's a good pairing. Now, it is now 7:48. This is Pienaar and Friends on Times Radio.